welcome on into Dynasty Never Rests, a podcast focused on Dynasty fantasy football, trades, and awesome guest stars. This is our 8th show out of many, and I'm excited to introduce our next incredible guest, Ralph Martinez, or how a lot of you may know him as Lobo Fantasy Football Den. Ralph, how are you?
I am phenomenal, Zach. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. I was anxiously waiting for the invitation on. I've been watching every episode so far, and you've had some amazing guests, so I'm excited to be part of that.
Yeah, I'm kind of on a Dynasty Pro streak here. Had Steve 2 weeks ago, had Bob last week, so just gotta keep going down the line.
Get through the staff, dude. I love it.
Absolutely. So, as you being from Phoenix, I'm guessing you watched Devin Booker just go nuts last night.
I did. I got to see him go nuts. I got to see him dap up a baby, and then got to see that hamstring injury take its course, and the Suns did not look the same afterwards. They've overcome some injuries throughout the year. I'm hoping. I mean, D. Ayton was hurt for about 10 games. They had Chris Paul hurt for about 2 months, and they looked great. So hopefully they can pick up some slack with Book out for games 3 and 4. Yeah, it kind of brings back some terrible memories from last year's finals against the Bucks. So I'm hoping that does not happen, but we will see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are here to talk about your football team, which is much less successful than the Phoenix Suns, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. So It's not been a busy offseason for the Dallas Cowboys, unfortunately. What free agent moves have they made that you've liked, and maybe what's one that you haven't liked near as much?
Yeah, we can start off with the one that I liked, obviously, and I think for many reasons, because they let so many people walk. I mean, we saw Randy Gregory walk. I mean, that was a big one, and obviously – who knows what happened between the whole contract situation. He had accepted a deal with us and then goes back, turns right around and goes to Denver and takes that deal instead. We see him walk. La'el Collins, I think, is probably the biggest free agency departure that left from the Cowboys. He was a phenomenal piece of that offensive line. And so Joe Burrow and the Bengals get an amazing lineman with Collins there. And so that's a huge departure for them. And obviously giving up Amari Cooper for a can of busted biscuits. Not even like fresh biscuits, dude. We got nothing from them. So all that really kind of just pains my soul for the boys. And I think when it comes to additions, I will say I'm happy that Nate Washington is the wide receiver 3-4 to replace that Cedric Wilson type role in that offense. So I'm excited about that. I never really got to see him used too much in Pittsburgh. I don't think we ever really did. So hopefully we get to see him a little bit with the way Dallas throws the ball. And another one that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit is Dante Fowler. He's kind of had, obviously I believe he was the 4th overall pick 4 or 5 years ago when he joined the league. And so now, he hasn't really been able to do much, but with Dan Quinn there another year and kind of just seeing what he did to that defense last year, I'm excited to have Fowler on board. I mean, we had Gregory leave and to bring in Fowler. Hopefully he can fill in some of that void, but we'll see. It's been a rough offseason for the boys.
Yeah, I do really like the addition of Washington. I think that he's a better player than Cedric Wilson is, and with the price that kind of Cedric Wilson was paid, you're kind of grateful that you got Washington at the price. At a lower price, and from what I understand to be a better player. And so although they haven't done a whole lot of good this offseason, especially you look at Devontae Parker getting traded for basically a 3rd round pick, and then Amari Cooper getting traded for a 5th and a 6th, was it?
Yeah, 5th and a 6th. And then I believe the boys gave up a 5th or something like that. So, I mean, it ended up just being nothing. It's actually really atrocious, which has Jerry Jones written all over it. So,
yeah, but that's Jerry always does atrocious things. And my projection here is that they go wide receiver in the first round of the NFL draft. But what are you thinking that the Cowboys tackle in the draft here?
Knowing Jerry, you're probably right, which is not exactly what I want. I mean, not only did we lose Collins in the draft, but we also lost Connor Williams, who, I mean, he wasn't the greatest. I think he led the league 2 years in a row in offensive holding calls. So, not a huge loss there, but to lose two big linemen like that, Smith is constantly. I mean, I shouldn't say constantly. He's been on and off for that offensive line. I mean, just 2 years ago, Travis Frederick just up and retired to kind of have that. So now that offensive line really right now just consists of Zach Martin, who's probably one of the best defensive linemen in the league still, and Smith, and that's it. And I personally would love for them to go for Tyler Lindenbaum, or even for a guy like Zion Johnson, for that offensive line to protect Dak and to really just give him a little bit of more time. And I think that's what the route they should take. The route they're probably going to take is your route and say they're probably going to go wide receiver. And whether that is Burks or potentially I could see a world where they get Olave. But I don't know what they'll do. And it's just, we never know what to do. I mean, a couple of years ago when they drafted Zeke instead of Ramsey, I mean, I think all Cowboys fans were excited, but we all thought they were going Ramsey. Now we just don't know. We just don't know. So.
Yeah, I think Jones is one that really likes to focus on the offensive side of the ball and doesn't necessarily handle it all that well.
Yep. Agreed.
And that's hard to handle. I'm sorry that you have to deal with Jerry Jones each and every year. That has to be hard. As a bystander, I just look in at the Cowboys and I'm like, Ryan Pace was not good for the Bears, but it's nothing compared to Jerry Jones.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. It's tough every single year. And you watch teams go from nothing to something because of a good GM. I mean, you look at the Bills 4 or 5 years ago, they were the laughing stock. They were a crappy team. And you see them, they've got these amazing people and amazing weapons. And obviously Josh Allen is at the core of that, but it's an unbelievable turnaround. And I think the boys have been stuck in this mediocre state for the last 25 years and it sucks. So,
and they've had a good set of tools for the last 25 years. It seems like, they've had two definitely above average quarterbacks, which is more than a lot of franchises can say. And they just can't put it together. For some reason, they get to the postseason and then they can't play in the postseason. So
my biggest heartache for the rest of my life will always be the fact that Tony Romo never even got to a Super Bowl. And that man was so talented. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks to ever play the game personally. I know a lot of people probably hate that, but that is personally just, he was a great quarterback and just Jerry Jones just royally screwed that up for him. So it's tough now to watch. I mean, Dak, I think now is coming in on year 5, year 6. I can't remember exactly what it is, but we're seeing his career just pass right through us, and who knows what's going to happen. I mean, Zeke's out of that prime stage where he was just lighting the league up, and Cooper's gone, and it's tough to see the boys, man. But hey, it is what it is. I chose them when I was a baby. I got to stick with them.
Yeah, right now Dak's career track seems so similar to Phillip Rivers. He's an above average guy who puts up numbers each and every year, but he isn't elite enough to carry his team.
Yeah.
He needs that support from the rest of the roster. And so, yeah, that's when I think of a similar career track. That's kind of where I see it, because he's good, but he can't carry the whole team on his back.
Yeah, I agree.
So if the Cowboys do pick a wide receiver in the first round, who are you wanting that guy to be?
If it is wide receiver, which, like we kind of mentioned, it seems like that's the route that Jerry would take. I personally would really like Burks. I don't know if Burks will still be there for them personally. I mean, I think potentially the wide receiver one off the board will be London. Maybe Wilson after that, and Burks could be the third wide receiver taken. So maybe he's there for them, maybe he isn't. But I see Burks fitting that offense pretty well. I would love to see Wilson in that offense. I mean, I think in my rankings, I have Wilson as my wide receiver one in this draft. So to have the boys get Wilson would be a huge win for them. I think he's very similar to Amari Cooper in the way that he runs his routes. He's a very crisp route runner. That was what made Amari Cooper very successful for a long time, especially with the boys. So, I mean, I think he could come in and fill in that Amari Cooper type role. Not to say that he does that year one right off the bat, but I think he's got that ability. So, I mean, I'm leaning on those guys. And in a perfect world for me, the Cowboys would go and get Tyler Lindenbaum or Zion Johnson. And in round 2, they go and they get another wide receiver then, because this draft is just so loaded with awesome wide receivers that I would prefer that they did that. And that way, I think that would improve the offense. But that's why I'm here, and Jerry Jones is there, and I'm sure they're going to do something completely different. And it's a little bizarre, but I would love in the second round if they got a guy like Pickens, if they got a guy, if he was still available, obviously, like Jamison Williams, maybe in the second round. It might be a bit of a stretch, but he's one of my big sleepers, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit. But Jahan Dotson, I'm huge on him. I know you were in part of the trade in the recent Dynasty Pros trade that I did, where I actually got rid of Keenan Allen. And when I got rid of him, I really wanted to get some draft picks, because I'm hoping to get some of these wide receivers in some of that early to mid second round. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I gave you Jahan Dotson, good, because I'm not as big a fan, so you can talk about him a lot more in depth than I can. So that'll be good. We'll breaking down those wide receivers. All right, I think we should just go straight into it. Let's break down those rookie wide receivers. There's, like you said, this is a deep class in terms of the wide receiver position. So, like, I'm expecting 3 wide receivers in the top 20. I'm expecting 5 or 6 wide receivers in the first round. And I'm expecting basically the same amount in the second round. I think in the top 60 picks, top 64 picks, we could see 12 wide receivers gone. I think that's very realistic, because there's so many teams that have that hole. And so we're here to break down some of those guys and tell you, maybe where a good fit would be, what they do well. And yeah, so I'm going to start us off here. We're going to alternate people. And I made sure that neither of us was covering, both the Ohio State guys or something like that. So we had some variability here. So the first guy is Treylon Burks. We've talked about him a little bit, but for me, he's my number 1 wide receiver in the class. And I know that some people are scared of him because of his combine performance, but I think we've gotten to the point where we put so much stock in the combine that you lose some of the stuff that you see on film. And for me, the film is a lot more important than the combine.
Agreed.
I think he's just this X wide receiver that's going to fit really well. in the NFL. He's not gigantic, but I mean, he's 6'2", 225. That's a guy who's going to go up and come down with the ball a lot. He's really smooth after the catch.
Yep.
He's one of when he gets the ball in space, he looks really, really good. He as a redshirt freshman, he returned kicks at 220 pounds. Not very often that you see that, but he did that and did that well. He just, when he gets out into space, he is electric. He has great vision, and so a guy that has sure hands, can go up and get the ball, and is really good in space is someone that I want on my football team. So like, I would love for him to somehow make it on the Bears, but the Bears don't have a first round pick. So I don't see that happening, but my ideal home for him, I would love him to go hang out with Justin Herbert. Man, would I love that.
I mean, I love me some Herbie. Herbie's my boy, so I would
absolutely
love him to go there.
And Keenan Allen's getting towards the end of his career. I think he's 2-3 years of being elite left, and so I don't know how many years he has on his contract, but if you have Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Treylon Burks in that AFC West division, you're going to need a powerhouse offense, and adding Treylon Burks to that may make them the best offense in that division, and that's hard to get to because that division just went absolutely nuclear this offseason.
It did. I'm going to watch every single game on Red Zone of that entire division this year because they're going to be so much fun.
I think you have to. Like, it's just, it may be the first time we have 4 teams from the same division make the playoffs, and I'm very excited for that.
I would be shocked if any of those teams goes below 500, just because it's so tough to see.
Yeah, I mean, Raiders, I think, are the weakest team in the division, but they're not sitting on their hands. They went and got Devontae Adams, and they are going to put up a fight to try to sneak in and to try to compete with this crazy division.
Yep. Yeah. One fun thing that I saw about Burks, because I also really do enjoy him, and I love watching his tape, and I think he was able to prove a lot. But obviously, people talk, and I know we'll talk about him in just a sec, but people are talking about how big Drake London is, and I think that's, to put into perspective, Burks has larger hands, so he actually measured in with larger hands than Drake London, and longer arms than Drake London as well. So I think that's actually a point that people, you talk about Drake and you're saying, cool, Drake London's this huge Mike Evans 2.0, which is my comparison for Drake London, really is a Mike Evans type wide receiver. But you're seeing a guy who's 6'2", running a 4.5 at that speed with those measurements. Burks is a beast, and I'm super excited to see where he goes. For landing spot, I would agree with you. I think him on the Chargers would be nuts. I think there's a world where he really does end up on the Packers.
I think it's a great spot for him, but as a Bears fan, I just can't say that I want that. I can't say, oh yeah, that's a great landing spot for him. I would love that, because I would hate that. They just got rid of Devontae Adams. Can't I see a year of Allen Lazard and
and Randall Cobb? And 34-year-old Randall Cobb, you don't want that?
That's exactly what I want.
And I love Randall Cobb, but it's
he's in his 30s. He was not himself last year, and I think Rodgers figured that out. And even if he is the wide receiver 1 or 2, it's not going to be pretty. So the Packers do have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, so I'm sure that they are going to pick a wide receiver. But I would much rather them reach on a guy like Christian Watson or Jahan Dotson.
I would love Jahan Dotson there. We'll talk about him in just a sec, but I would love Jahan Dotson there.
All right, let's move on to Mr. Wilson.
Yes. So Wilson, or actually, I think I've got London, right? Drake London.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes. No, you're good. You're good. Drake London is, as I mentioned, I won't get too much into him. I think there's a lot on film for him. I think and this is just based on some of the research that I've actually been focusing on, and hopefully I'm able to talk more about this in the next couple of weeks. But you see this progression from college wide receivers, obviously, year over year, and that's what you want to see. And you saw that from Drake London at USC. Obviously, he was able to he hasn't really had a chance to stay fully healthy at some points. I think the most games he's ever played there at USC has been 8 in one season. So that, I think, is the largest concern for Drake London, is going into that and seeing some of those pieces really say, can he play a full season? He wasn't able to complete a full college season once. NFL seasons are almost double what a college season is.
Right.
What is that going to look like for him? And so I think for me, that is the biggest concern, is that durability piece for Drake London, because everything else, dude, that guy's a monster. As we were talking about, we've seen Mike Evans dominate the league. I think 7 1,000-yard seasons in a row, something like that for Mike Evans.
I think it's 8, and Brandon Cooks has 7, or has 7 1,000. I think.
Yes.
I think Evans has 8 after this season. So,
which is just bizarre. I mean, it's nuts to think that he's just been able to consistently do that. But I mean, when you look at the measurements for them, they are very similar. Mike Evans is 6'5". Drake London measured in at 6'4", very close to a 6'5". So I mean, I think wingspan is almost similar. He obviously did not run the 40-yard dash, but I would assume he'd be right in the 4.5, 4.6, 4.6 range, just based on that, which is nuts for how big he is. I know a lot of people have him mocked going to the Jets. I, as an Elijah owner and Elijah Moore truther and Elijah Moore biggest fan, number 1 guy for Elijah Moore, I would love that. They need to open up that field for Zach Wilson, and they need to open up the defenses, because I mean, I think right now what you're seeing is Elijah Moore is their main guy, which is great. I think he can do it, but he's going to have that coverage. He's going to have that attention, rather than when they get a big guy like Drake London in that backfield, getting those deep bombs. That's going to open up the field for that offense. And I think they're fully invested in Zach Wilson and what they've got going on there. And I love Robert Saleh there with the Jets. So I think I would love for him to go to the Jets. That's my ideal landing spot for him. But I do love him. And like I said, we saw, I mean, even last season in 8 games at USC, he got over 1,000 yards. He's a monster. He led the team in red zone targets, even though he only played 8 games. So he was getting all the targets when he was in the game. So I think there's a lot of pieces to Drake London. So I'm excited to see him. Like I said, the biggest question for me is just, can he put together a full season? And I hope that he can.
Yeah, to me, in terms of wide receiver hitting, I feel like he is the safest guy. I feel like even if he does have some injury concerns, I think he is the safest wide receiver in the draft, to where I know that this guy's going to make it in the NFL. And you can't say that with a whole lot of people. And so that's just a quality that I really like. You know, he has that Mike Evans quality, or that Jarvis Landry quality, to where you're so confident throwing the ball to them. You know that they're going to come down with that ball. Yeah. And that's what you have in Drake London. So if he can stay healthy and he can be that Jarvis Landry, that Mike Evans is a better comp because of the red zone threat that Mike Evans is and Jarvis Landry is not, but they are the same similar reliable guys that year in and year out they are going to catch the ball, do what they do each and every year. And I love that about Drake London because I think he can do that. I just think his upside is not quite as much as Burks. But I would love him at the Jets as well, because a lot of people have been saying, well, if he goes to the Jets, then what happens to Elijah Moore? And I'm like, there's literally one receiving threat in that entire offense. So to bring in a guy who's going to take some of that coverage away from Elijah Moore, that's a good thing. I don't know how there are more than one wide receiver on the field at a time.
Yeah.
And so if you have two studs like Elijah Moore and Drake London, it's going to be good for everyone there. Not just Drake London, not just Elijah Moore, but it's going to open running lanes more. It's going to allow Zach Wilson to pass in more than one direction. And so, yeah, I would love him going to the Jets. I think that's a great landing spot.
Agreed.
All right, now we'll go on to Wilson. How about that?
Now we go into Wilson.
Yeah, so Garrett Wilson, he's a stud, man. I hated watching him and loved watching him because as an Iowa Hawkeyes fan, you don't like to see this guy destroy your team. But, it happens. And it's really unfortunate. I remember Christian McCaffrey in the Rose Bowl about 5 or 6 years ago had like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Hawkeyes. And it allowed me to see that guy is special. But it also, hurt me to my very core. So Garrett Wilson is a guy that I've been watching for the last couple of years. His metrics are all really good. He's a fast guy. He's a good route runner. He can go up and get the ball. He's just a really solid prospect. Like he's not a big guy, but I love the comp that he is similar to Brandon Cooks.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that will hit in the NFL. He's going to be a consistent guy. And he can do it all. If they need him to play a slot role, he could play a slot role. If he's got to be the deep ball guy, he can do that. If he's got to be a short area target guy, he can do that. I feel like he just hits on all cylinders. And he played in, I would say, the toughest defensive conference in football. And to have those statistics and those marks in that division just speaks volumes to what he can do. And I think he can absolutely do that at a high level. He plays with speed. He's smart on the field. He separates, I don't have a whole lot of bad to say about Garrett Wilson.
I agree with that. I think when you see him, I know we talked about Drake London being NFL ready. I think he is NFL ready, and you start to see some of those pieces coming from him. And I think there's a lot of teams that would love to have him. I saw a mock draft a couple days ago, and it had him projected. I've seen him go as low as 8 to the Falcons, which is a little bizarre. Knowing, I mean, obviously, yes, Calvin Ridley's out for this entire year. Which in itself is nuts, but I feel like he is very similar to Calvin Ridley in a sense of build, in a sense of route running. Calvin Ridley just runs very crisp routes. I feel like they're very similar. So I don't know exactly if I'd have him going there.
Right.
I could see a team like the Eagles taking him, like the Saints taking him, and then like we were talking about earlier, I would love if the Chargers took him. I think that would be a phenomenal replacement for, to your point, in 2 years down the line when Keenan Allen is no longer able to produce that wide receiver one production, and you have a 26-year-old Herbert in his prime. Absolutely, that's the guy that you want to pair. So, I mean, those three teams, I would love any of them.
Yeah, I would love Garrett Wilson to go to the Eagles. That's kind of where I have him going. They really need that third pass catching option. They've got Goddard, they've got Smith, but someone who is just consistent and really good, like Wilson is. The only problem with having him there is like I don't feel like either of them Smith or Wilson qualifies as an X wide receiver, a jump ball wide receiver. And I really do feel like that's what Hurts needs to continue his development. Somebody who's going to go and get the ball, because like we've seen Hurts play, and like he's not the most accurate quarterback in the world, but he gets it in the general area. And so if you have a guy who's sure-handed and can just come down with that ball, that would be a good fit. So I almost think that George Pickens is a better fit at the Eagles than Wilson, but I love Wilson. There's a lot of places he could go and make a nice home. The Cowboys, he could go there.
I wouldn't mind him going to the boys. I think he's very similar to CeeDee Lamb. I think when I looked at if I'm not mistaken, let me see, Garrett Wilson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he's 6 foot 183. If I'm not mistaken, I believe CeeDee Lamb is 6 foot like 190.
Yeah. Oh, they're similar in terms of size and ability, and it wouldn't be the greatest fit, but you never know with Jerry.
You don't. I stand corrected. Actually, CeeDee Lamb is a little taller than I thought. He's 6'2", 198. So he's a little bigger than I thought. I actually thought CeeDee Lamb and him were a little bit more in comparison. Okay, that's good to know. That's awesome.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next guy. His teammate.
Yes, his teammate. I want him to be with Justin Fields so bad. I want him to be with your Bears. I want him to. They have the chemistry. We saw what Chase and Burrow did last year when that chemistry is just built. There's so many good pieces. I wish it's like Dragon Tales right now. It's like I wish with all my heart, and I'm just like rubbing on this dragon skill for it to happen. And it's not. Yeah, I know. But I truly believe that had he, we were talking about, the one thing with him, and I think people are scared about, is like, can he produce that elite production that you want from a first round pick if you draft him in the first round? And I think that's really what goes into play. He never had a 1,000-yard season. I think the biggest thing you see from him is just the consistency piece. So obviously, like he averaged right around 15 yards a catch. He averaged 16 his freshman year, 17 his sophomore, 14 his junior, 14.4 his senior year. So consistently, he's getting that separation because he is such a good route runner. I think you posted a tweet the other day that was comparing his route running to Jerry Jeudy. And I think him and Dotson are some of the best route runners in this class. And I think he's a great route. He makes it look easy, dude. He really does make it look easy. And I think he would help Justin Fields' development so much from the comfortability standpoint, from the chemistry that they've built. But I really believe that he could probably go and end up on a team like the Saints. Pair him along with Michael Thomas. I think him and Michael Thomas would make a good 1-2 punch, there. But I also, I think, again, he's one of those other guys that I could see the Packers taking. All these guys we've talked about so far, I could see the Packers taking all of them. So,
they could take any wide receiver in the draft. I mean, and improve. Even if they took a couple in the 7th, I think it improves their wide receiver core.
Big time. So yeah, I like him. I'm hoping he lands in a team that can give him that productivity right away. So
yeah, I could see a team like the Lions moving up from 32 and grabbing them. Let's say they do go quarterback at 2, which I surely hope they don't, because I'm really not a fan of this QB class. And even though I'm in the NFC North, I want to see the Lions succeed. I like Dan Campbell. I like what he's doing.
Yeah,
and I would love to see them pass on quarterback this year and stick it out with Jared Goff one more year and then get a much better quarterback in next year's draft. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm getting more nervous as the draft comes along that they're going to pick like Willis at 2 or Pickett or I don't know. But I would love to see Olave go to the Lions just to add to that wide receiver core, to give them a star-studded wide receiver that can really help them compete and give him a year to settle in the NFL, to give him a nice quarterback in next year's draft to pair with, and the Lions actually are a relevant team.
Yeah.
Is it going to happen? We'll see, but
that we will.
All right. Who's next on our board? Jamison Williams. He's a tricky one to me. I mean, I really like him. I think right now he is being a little undervalued because of his injury concerns.
Yep.
And I think that the same narrative came with Devontae Smith. You know, he's a smaller guy. Although his BMI is more than Devontae Smith, I think he's a very solid wide receiver. He's a speed guy for sure. He is fast. He can break away. If you didn't know this, he was a record-breaking hurdler in high school. Yeah, and so he's just got some insane speed, and he can maneuver with that speed as well. He gets separation. He's got good catch radius. So he doesn't have that big of concern, other than like guys similar to him, like your John Rosses of the world. They didn't hit. They had this great athletic profile. They're these fast, small guys, and they didn't hit. But then you look at Jalen Waddle, who small, fast guy, same wide receiver system, and you're like, you know what? Maybe this guy is different than John Ross, or different than, I can't think of who another speed wide receiver who bit the bullet is off the tip of my tongue. But if he could have the sort of career without the injuries that Will Fuller has had,
yeah,
I think that would be great. You know, the problem is the injury right now. There's a world where he's the last wide receiver taken in the first round. I just don't think he should be. He's super electric, and I would love to see him thrive in the NFL. I just coming off an ACL, you know, there's a narrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I will say about him, because obviously, like when you look at his measurements, I mean, he comes in at 6'1". So I think with the height that Jamison Williams is, I think there's my biggest concern for that in particular. I mean, obviously he blew up this year at Alabama. I mean, his first 2 seasons, because he actually transferred over from Ohio State. And so you see that in Ohio State, he played 4 in 6 games, but I mean, he put up less than 200 yards both seasons. He comes into Alabama this year, 80 receptions, 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns. He just crushes it. Now, is he a product of Alabama or is he a product of talent? And obviously, you want to lean towards the talent, and I think he's got that talent. So, I mean, I think for me, when I look at that, he's also a really good one that if he's there for me at 107, 108, 109 in rookie drafts, I'm taking him.
Absolutely.
Whether he is on a team that, I mean, they have 2 or 3 wide receivers or not, I'm taking him. And I think there's that very, very high reward with Jamison Williams. So it's exciting to kind of see that. And hopefully, had it not been for that injury in the national championship game, he's probably a lot of people's wide receiver 1 right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and transferring from Ohio State, I think, was the best thing for him because you look at that wide receiver room, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson. I don't pronounce his last name very well, so I don't try it. So I just call him Jackson Smith. But that wide receiver room, I think Smith is going to be the wide receiver 1 in his class. And so
agreed.
That whole room is just, it's tough to, if you're the 3rd or 4th fiddle in that offense, I think he did the absolute right thing in finding a place. And man, I would absolutely love to see him in Buffalo. That's my dream.
Him with Zach, oh man. Him with Josh Allen, and then you start looking at some of those pieces there. Just beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, not to take anything away from your Gabriel Davis, but that would be a good, a super awesome offense. You have Davis, you have Williams, you've got Diggs, you've got Knox, Singletary, or Zach Moss, or whoever they draft, or
Breece Hall.
Josh Allen is really the running back there. And so, just adding that another elite wide receiver or potentially elite wide receiver to that wide receiver room would be something special and might give them the edge to not go into overtime against the Cincinnati Bengals and just win it, or the Chiefs, and win it straight up.
Agreed. We've gone through all these wide receivers, dude, and every single time we talk about all of them, I just can't help. I know this is going to kill you, but I can't help but think how awesome any of the guys that we've mentioned so far would be on the Packers. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Every time we go through them, it feels like whatever wide receiver goes to Green Bay, we will see tweets. We will see the Twitter world blow up about this wide receiver is now my wide receiver 1.
Right. I feel like that was the same narrative we had with the Saints and the Lions last year.
True.
Once Michael Thomas was injured, and the Lions hype hasn't really stopped. Amon-Ra St. Brown, with no one else on the field, had really good statistics, and people are carrying that over. But if they draft somebody in the top 2 rounds, I think people are going to forget about Amon-Ra St. Brown and talk about somebody new. So
I agree.
All right. None of these wide receivers are going to the Packers, but let's move on to the next option here.
Mr. Dotson, one of my favorites. Dotson, there's something about, like I said, you start to see some of the progression. He had a phenomenal, and I mean phenomenal, senior year. When I look at what he was able to accomplish at Penn State his senior year, 91 receptions for him actually was very impressive. He was able to kind of double that from, I mean, obviously from his freshman year, but more receptions than Garrett Wilson, more yards than Garrett Wilson, more touchdowns. Actually, I think they had the same touchdowns. Yeah, they both had 12 touchdowns. Their senior season. So statistically speaking, he put up some amazing numbers his senior year. We saw that improvement year over year from him. I think you see game film if you get a chance. Anyone gets a chance. If you're watching this from his freshman year, you see those footsteps, those routes. They just become from this very sloppy freshman, just this kid really coming out of high school and running this route to what he is doing now is just great. He's got phenomenal hands. He gets the separation that he needs. I think he has the ability to kind of create that yards after catch that people love to see. People love to see that number come in, and he's able to kind of just really run with that. I'm a huge fan of this guy, man. I think obviously he comes in at 5'11", so he came in just under 6 foot. Probably the biggest thing and the biggest knock for him is he's one of the lightest wide receivers in this draft. He comes in at 178. I think the only wide receiver that came in under him, if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking right now, I thought there was one. No. He was the lightest one. Got it. So obviously, and actually, fun fact, he weighed in at 178, and Jamison Williams, our boy we were just talking about, weighed in at 179. So that's super interesting. But that would be my biggest concern, is obviously the same one that people were having last year about Devontae. I think he was able to kind of prove people that it doesn't mean crap. How much that is, and skill kind of takes that over. But if I'm looking at him, I think that's the biggest thing. And we see guys kind of gain some weight in the offseason when they do join NFL squads and kind of just do that. So maybe he gains 2 or 3 pounds of muscle and kind of just able to do that. But I really like him. I think he's able, like I said, to he'll probably be round 2, round 3 guy. I could see, I wouldn't, like I said, I would not mind him going to the Packers with their 2 picks in the second round. When I look at Dotson as well, there's one other team that I think would actually take their chance with him, and it would make a lot of sense for them to go with him. And I think that would be the Vikings. And I say that because I know that they have Thielen and obviously Jefferson. But obviously Irv Smith is coming back from an injury that we don't know. And I love Irv Smith, so I'm hoping he does phenomenal. They've got some good core. But to get Dotson going there and be a reliable wide receiver 3 for them, I think would be a good.
And Thielen's going to be 32 this season.
Exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, they signed him for like a 3 or 4 year extension a couple years ago. So after this year, I think he'll have 1 year left. So maybe they cut ties with him if he's able to come in and produce well, and he's able to immediately be a wide receiver too. So I think that would be a very interesting pick for the Vikes to swoop up and take him. And if not, I think there's a world where, I mean, even as you just mentioned, the Lions, I think would be a good pick for them to put alongside on that offense. So we'll see what happens with them. But I like.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I like to have seen his progression over the couple of years. It reminds me of Davante Adams' progression when he came into the NFL, because as a Bears fan, I watched a lot of Davante Adams, and I loved it when Aaron Rodgers threw to Davante Adams at the beginning of his career. He dropped the ball in the end zone so many times his first 2 seasons, and then Davante Adams turned into an animal. And it wasn't as fun to see Aaron Rodgers throw to Devontae Adams anymore. And Jahan Dotson has had this similar arc in college.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want his development to stop here. And that is part of my concern is I don't want this to be his peak.
Right.
What he did in college. And so if he can continue to grow and continue to do things, but seeing this huge progression so early, I guess I have a small concern is in that maybe that progression doesn't continue and he doesn't continue to flourish and continue to learn at a high level. And maybe I'm wrong. And he was phenomenal last year. And I would love to see that translate to the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping it translates well. But I mean, 1,200 yards and those 12 touchdowns. I think for me that was it was a good year for him to put it up, especially because they had a good team there and he was able to put that together. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
Absolutely. Now here is my favorite guy in the draft in terms of just like he's my favorite sleeper or favorite George Pickens. I think he has the best hands in this draft class.
Okay.
And when you look at George Pickens' statistics, what he's done over the past couple of years, you're like, why are you talking about this guy? He doesn't have 1,000 career yards. He doesn't, he hasn't stayed healthy. He hasn't, and that's a concern to me. He has health issues, but I genuinely think that if he had stayed healthy, he's in this conversation with Wilson and Drake. And he's at the top of this draft. But because he has, you look at that statistics, his 4 years of college or his 3 years of college, and he doesn't have 1,000 yards, and you're like, in total, and you're like, what's impressive about this guy? Like he's so mediocre. But when you watch his film, man, he's just this go up and get the ball. You throw it anywhere, and he's going to go up and get the ball. It kind of reminds me a little of how Mike Williams played the first couple of years in his career. He would jump ball for anything. He didn't care what injury he sustained coming down. As long as he got the ball, he didn't care.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's happened to him. He's just come down wrong on a couple of catches, and that's why he's been injured. He's a great end zone target. He's got elite catch radius, elite hands. If he can stay healthy, somebody's going to grab him in the second round and be very pleased with the athlete that they get.
Yep, I agree. There's a lot of potential there. He's got the build for it. He's one of those guys, and it also comes to, I mean, he was at a good school, which obviously I think for that, the fact that he's got a highlight tape, to your point, without having ever put together a healthy season, is pretty damn impressive. So I think whatever team, I mean, I've seen a lot of mocks having your Bears take him, and
I would love that.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I think that's a good guy to get alongside Fields, especially as you kind of mentioned earlier. Hurts, however, Fields was a very accurate deep ball passer. Fields is actually a phenomenal deep ball passer, but I will.
Yes, he's a phenomenal deep ball passer, but actually Jalen Hurts in college was more accurate than Justin Fields.
Oh, agreed.
Fun fact for you.
I just think Hurts has been put in a place where that is not a focus for the Eagles. So we've seen him struggle just a bit, but Anyway,
absolutely.
Yes. Pickens would be a phenomenal day 2 pick for your Bears. I would be so happy. And again, there's, as you know, and most people that if they follow me, they know, I'm a huge Justin Fields guy. And I'm not a Bears fan. I'm just a talent fan, and I think he's got some major talent. So I would love for Pickens to be on your Bears.
Yeah, I think surrounding Fields with a second guy who can catch the ball. Mooney can take the top off the defense, but that doesn't matter if there's nobody below the defense. And so they didn't grab anyone relevant in free agency. So I have a feeling they have to be going wide receiver here, or they're just twiddling their thumbs this year and waiting for next year to. They've got a huge amount of cap room next year because of all the trades they made. So next year, I think they'll have a heyday in free agency. But man, I'm hoping and praying that Pickens lands there, because Olave is not going to make it, unfortunately.
I know. It tears my heart. It tears my heart to hear that. Okay, our last guy, which is one of my, and you know what? At this point, he's been so hyped up that he's not a sleeper anymore.
Yeah,
he is a phenomenal prospect, and I think it's just now like NFL rule, or like NFL just like one of those bylaws that every single year an awesome Moore has to come out of the draft that's a wide receiver. I mean, last year we had Elijah and Rondale. This year we have Skye, and Skye is the limit. Ayo, for Skye Moore. I think there's a lot to be said. And just a fun fact about him: he measured in at the combine, and I want to say he was under 6 feet. I can tell you for a fact right now, 5'10". So he comes in at 5'10", and his hand was a 10 1/4, which, fun fact, comes in being the second biggest hand in the combine. Bigger hands than Drake London, bigger hands than Trey Burke. This guy, I mean, we talk about Pickett having like baby hands. This guy has a complete opposite of just like these Goliath hands to go up and get the ball. And again, he's a speedster. I mean, a 4.41. He put up a 1,300-yard season his senior year there at Western Michigan. There's a lot to love about this guy, but I think he's just so elusive. If you watch his gameplay, I mean, he really does. I can't remember who compared him to, just like a little bit of a bigger Austin Eckler, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's just this tough bowling ball of this wide receiver. And honestly, sometimes I'm not going to compare him, because Steve Smith was a phenomenal, one of the best wide receivers to play the game. Steve Smith out of Carolina, right, with the Panthers, but you see some of that physicality from Skye Moore. You see some of that toughness from him. And I love to see. He's one of those guys that I love to watch play football. And I think he does it the right way. And I think whatever team takes him, I also think he's a day 2 pick. Whatever team ends up taking him is getting a rock star. So I'm all on board for Skye Moore, and I'm aiming to get him to pair him along with my Elijah Moore shares everywhere, and just name every fantasy football team that I have with both of them. Just like the more the merrier. I know it's dumb, but I'm gonna do it.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I definitely like Skye Moore. I think that his landing spot is the most important of the people we've talked about today.
Agreed.
If he does not land in the right situation, I think that he has a chance to bust in the NFL. So I would love to see him in a situation with a good passer. I don't want him going to the Atlanta Falcons because it's going to be a rough start. And so if he can land, now bear with me, with the Green Bay Packers, his career would be fine. Not that I'm hoping for that, but if he's got even an above average, quarterback, I think he'll be fine. I would really like to see him in Tennessee. That is my ideal landing spot.
I think
Tannehill's not elite, but Skye Moore comps differently than AJ Moore. Right? Sorry, AJ Brown. But he would complement AJ Brown very well, and so I would love to see Robert Woods be able to mentor him for a couple years, and then just let Moore take off. They've basically had one pass catcher in the past 2 years besides Jonnu, who was on and off the field, and AJ Brown has had that issue as well. And so to just add another piece to that offense with a more than competent QB would be a great place for him.
I agree with that. I will say one last thing about Skye Moore is I also think a phenomenal place for him to land would be if the Chargers don't end up getting one in the first round. I would love for them to take him in the second. Him alongside Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, dude, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just want every wide receiver to go to the Chargers at this point.
Yes, that too.
All right, we got one last guy to talk about, Christian Watson. A lot of people in the Twitter space in the fantasy community are really big on Christian Watson. I think the guy does one thing very well, and the rest of his kit is not very good. He is really good against press coverage, and I mean really good. And that's a great quality to have. You know, Devontae Adams is one of the best guys against press coverage. Justin Jefferson is great against press coverage. But to me, that's most of what his kit entails. Like he's a fine pass catcher. He's got fine speed. He's got fine comparables. But I just don't think there's anything special about this guy. This guy, he reminds me of how I comped Trey Sermon last year. I said Trey Sermon is average at everything. There's no great part to his game, and even if he had one great metric, it's not enough to make him, you know, this high level player. So I think that Christian Watson is going to get overdrafted in both fantasy and in the NFL, and I just don't think he's anything special. I think his ceiling is very capped due to his skill set.
I agree. I think we talked about improvement, and we talked about year-over-year improvement for these players, and I think that's not what we saw from Christian. I think what we saw a lot of was like consistency of average, to your point. Consistency of never having 1,000-yard season, consistency of just like the little things that he did, which at North Dakota State, where, I mean, you know, it's not like they're in Alabama or in Oklahoma or, you know, I mean, anything like that they're not a big NFL producing college. So to see that, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think maybe if landing spot, he lands somewhere great and there's a lot of pieces and he's there in the late third, early third in my mock drafts, or I'm sorry, in my rookie drafts, maybe I'll take that risk, but there's just a lot of other guys who I'd rather have personally.
Yeah, right now he's going between the 2.2 and the 2.4.
Nuts.
In rookie drafts. I think there is one landing spot, and it's got some conditions that I like. One landing spot for him, and it's on the condition that Deebo Samuel gets traded.
Okay. I was going to say, you're about to say Chargers, aren't you?
No, I actually don't want him for the Chargers. Yeah, I think that if Deebo gets traded, it would be a fine place for him to be a wide receiver 2 to reconnect with Trey Lance. There he could have a career. But the fact that I'm channeling one landing spot that I think he'd be decent at, doesn't inspire confidence in me, and it shouldn't inspire confidence in you guys either. So that's out of these top like 10 guys, that's really the first guy we've had anything bad to say about. So
So again, this wide receiver class.
Yes. And there's several guys we didn't get to that definitely have high upside, like Metchi and David Moore and Khalil Shakir.
Man, another great one. Another great one in Shakir.
Yeah, he is. I am loving how far he is falling right now. In rookie mock drafts. I hope the trend continues because I would love to steal him in the third round like I have been. So
agreed.
Well, I think that's pretty much all we have for you on the breaking down the rookie wide receivers. But Ralph, I want to know where I can find your content.
Yes, absolutely, man. So you can find my content on Twitter at LobosFFDen. Always open for a discussion, open for a chat, open for a joke. I promise, don't take me too serious, but take me as you want. Always
just look at his pinned tweet, and you will know that he's not a super serious guy.
That's all you need to know. Look at the pin, and you'll know. No, but overall, I'm also writing articles for FF Faceoff and for Dynasty Pros. It's where we met. Super happy to have been on here with you, man. It's been a blast. It always is. So I would love to be on anytime you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blast talking to you. Like, we type at each other a lot, but we don't get this face-to-face, this interface often. And it's just great when we have the opportunity to. So
agreed.
Well, thanks for coming on and talking my ear off about Jahan Dotson. And it was just a pleasure to have you.
Same. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
All right. See you later.